When you say nation, you talk about land. Our land is Africa. That's undeniable. This land is not our land.
That what Frantz Fanon's theory, psychological theory, is that we're in a post-colonial psychology. And what he calls that is an auto-destructional stage, which is the oppressor will oppress for so long that the oppressed no longer have to be physically oppressed. They do it to themselves automatically.
I'm black. Do you hear me, man? Do you understand? I am black. I'm a nigga. You understand me? I was born black, I live black, and I'm gonna die probably because I'm black. Because some cracker that knows I'm black better than you, nigga, is probably gonna put a bullet in the back of my head.
Hey man, it's like this, man. It's like, you know, it's like it's revolution time, man. There's no questions asked. Revolution is here. You know what I'm saying? We the youth, we the young. It's time for us to break loose, you know? We don't have no freedom, no rights, man. We slaves right now. Everybody's still a slave. That's what they told us today. In other words, you still a slave. No matter how much money you got, you still ain't shit. So, you know, it's on, just like that. Just like
are really ready and willing to pay the price that is necessary for freedom. Our people will always be walking around here second-class citizens, or what you call 20th century slaves.
What price are you talking about, sir?
The price of freedom is death.
What's the figure?
I mean, what are you in this for? You want power, you want revenge, you know? What is it?
It's simple, Willie. I just want to be free.
Disease, socialism is the medicine for that. So we're trying to educate people so they don't have that response when you talk about socialism or even communism. Because socialism is just a transition to communism. And the first world people practiced early communalism. That's what Marx and Engels studied to learn about communism, was to study the first world people. They call them, primitive. Of course, you know, white people, when they start naming and define things, they define it in their interests. Everything outside of them is primitive, it's backwards. And that this is supposed to be the system that ends history. Capitalism is supposed to be end of history. There's no thing outside of history, outside of capitalism, that this is it. There's nothing better. You can't look for anything better. That's the line of the ruling class, that capitalism is the end of history. You just might as well just accept that, live under it, etc. But when you understand what they're asking you to live under, it's not capitalism, it's colonialism. It's colonial capitalism. It was built on slavery and genocide and land, as I say. So this program today is to help us understand gentrification in the context of capitalist colonialism and how we're going to get free from it, which is called Uhuru.
From the Bronx, I have an organization called Being United, which stands for Birth from the New Generation United. It has to do with bringing the game members of the street together for peace, black empowerment, black revolution, political awareness, financial literacy, youth development, and awareness to law. So up in the Bronx, what I do is I go to different rallies, I organize different gang members, and I get them on the same court, on the same page. A lot of the misconstruction that people have when it comes to games, they think that, you know, this the gang violence that they see and the gang culture that they see is just out of, like, you know, what they think. Right. But those that don't know, like me, I'm a Harlem Crip. So that was rooted out of the Black Power movement. The Crip industry itself is just rooted out of the Black Power movement. So when you have Raymond Washington was somebody that was looking up to you, you knew looking up to Bob Sill. And during that time, that's when we had what we now established as Community Revolution in Progress. When the Black Panther Party attacked and went amongst its demise, that's when you had the birth of Community Revolution in Progress, which is the Crips as we all know. But it wasn't up until J. Edgar Hoover and the counterintelligence program infiltrated these gangs and basically, well, these organizations, these tribes, and then which came to the term of gangs. It wasn't until he basically infiltrated and had, you know, plainclothes police officers and people basically of that entity dressed up as other gang members and started killing our own people by leaving their colors around and having them think that we was actually going to war for nothing, and that wasn't true. So my mission, my purpose is to get these gangs back on the same accord, what it means to be inside the Black Revolution, what it means to be protecting our people, what it means to be separating ourselves from a system that, you know, is a systematically oppressing our people, while basically educating when it comes to the Pan-Africanist movement and the African structure of the motherland.
We have a Q&A at the after the panel is over. We got a Q&A.
Q&A?
Yeah, at the end. Yeah. So you gotta.
I got a lot of Q&A.
So, man, Rob, we wanted you to speak about the role. We wanted you to speak about the role of the police, how their presence, their police presence, is to enforce gentrification in the black community. Can you speak to how that relates to the police presence and how the street organization should function in that particular type of scenario?
Well, anybody that's been seeing how police been going on inside of our communities, basically everybody's aware and see what's going on. But specifically, since we are in New York, we're going to talk about NYPD. NYPD is definitely there to infiltrate our communities. Although they paint the myth and they say that, our communities is where the most crime is at, so this is why they send the most units there, but we know that's not the case. It's just this is how it's being portrayed inside the media. So it was our people's mistake to believe that our self-defense and our defense and livelihood depends on the police department. When we decided to do that, this is going to basically be at the first stage. Our hands and our lives should not be governed inside of an entity that has nothing to do with us as a people. 1, 2, looking to oppress us as a people, and 3, looking to eradicate and just imprison our people. With the 13th Amendment, everybody's aware of the 13th Amendment. See, slavery has never been abolished, it just changed its form. So now, when you have that 13th Amendment basically allows for our people to be incarcerated and perform what they call indentured servitude under that amendment. So this is the new way that the police department and the government is actually using to enslave our people, besides the plantation, which is the economic working class when it comes to plantation. But when it comes to the police departments inside of our communities, we are very aware that the police is not there to protect us. They are not there to protect us. They are only there to attack, harm, and imprison us.
Overseers.
And overseers. And in order for us to get on the same page where we can police our own communities, we have to first bring back the unity structure between the Black Power family and the Black Power movement. Only we can save us. Police is not designed to do that. They're not here to do that. So we are only able to be the ones to basically make that happen with each other. That's my purpose of being inside of, not only inside of the gang culture, but also bring the gang culture back together. Why would we need any type of police department to defend our blocks and our areas when we have these gangs that's inside of these areas that we can do it ourselves? But in order for us to do that, we have to basically get back to the understanding of what the gang organization is and where does it stem from. We should not have to have an outside entity to come and police us. We pretty much know what we are. We pretty much know that we can police ourselves. We pretty much know our own behaviors. Now, when it comes to the police department, any police department, 9 times out of 10, when they come to a situation, they always make the situation worse. These are people that don't know where we're from. They don't understand us. They don't know how to communicate us. They don't know our trauma. They don't know anything that has to do with us. These are people that are just freshly trained, put in the field, coming to interaction with us, and because they're not knowing how to interact with us, this is why we see the tragedy that we see today. What is the first thing that a cop says when he kills an unarmed black person inside of the street? The first thing he says is he feels safe, he feels scared for his life. Sounds like a much of a coward. And we don't need cowards working inside of the street defending our people. That's something that we don't need. If the only thing that your answer is always going to be is you felt afraid for your life, so this is the reason why you pulled your weapon, that's a problem. That is an actual problem. These guys are not trained to defuse a problem. They're not trained to prevent a situation. They are trained to what they like to call basically deadly force, and this is what they're using. And because of the fact that they have the deadly force, they are able to use that and say this is their scapegoat for murdering black people. Because the minute they feel like they're afraid for themselves, that's exactly what they're going to result to. There won't be no stages, no levels, and none of that. And if we could, if we still think that a system, a criminal justice system, is supposed to save our people, it's not. We need to dismantle that system in its entirety. And there's many different parts to that system. But look at George Floyd's situation, for example. Many people think that George Floyd's situation was taken care of because of the fact that we're supposed to be seeking justice as a people. And that's not the truth. The only reason why they basically convicted Derek Chauvin was because of the fact that they wanted to save their cities from being burned. Because they seen about the protesting and about the riot, they seen how much money it was going to cost them.
They convicted him because all the cops turned their back on him too.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Now, realistically, being the fact that Derek Chauvin is somebody that was working for that agency and is somebody that didn't have a record, Now, people was looking for the conviction, hoping that he get up to 75 years, which we know realistically is not going to happen.
Getting 10.
Probably even less than that.
I thought he was going to get man too.
Probably even less than that.
I thought he was going to get man too.
So
I'm sorry, no, I'm interrupt. I got things to say about.
So when it comes when it comes to what we're dealing with here, we have to realize the fact that we cannot depend on no criminal justice system or just no system that has nothing to do with black people to basically help us in our future endeavors. Even when it comes to a political aspect, you see, we don't choose our presidents. We don't select our presidents. We just elect them. They give us people that we are now forced to choose in between. We don't like neither candidate, but because of the fact that there's only two options that's here, we have our people believing in the mentalities of we're gonna pick the lesser evil.
Yeah.
Evil is evil no matter which way you put it. There is no lesser, there is no greater. When you see somebody doing good, you don't see somebody tell you that you did even greater. No, you just did good. So, yeah, exactly. So when we dealing with this whole political infrastructure, we have to realize in order for us to basically have some type of burden and some type of stand in there, we have to have our own independent party to do that. We have to have our own independent political education course where we could now get these candidates, like my son that's here, so we could get the children of the youth and the ones that's basically out there already trained enough to basically counteract that system when it comes to that political aspect. There's many parts of white supremacy that we are dealing with. It's not just the police. And also, we have people that's inside of our own communities that share the same skin as us, that's working for these people. We have to be aware of that too. Just because they have the same color of your skin doesn't mean that they are your kin. So, with that being said, we have to understand that white supremacy is something that's on all levels, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, and all levels that you can imagine. But since we are speaking on police right now, we also have to understand that, yes, police is not something that needs to be inside our communities. We need to get rid of police by all means. And by defunding the police is not going to cover that. See, many people think that defunding the police means just taking the police off the street, and that's just that. No. Defunding the police is supposed to be about taking the money, excessive money that they get, and allowing it to come into our communities for the programs that we're supposed to be having, for the education in schools and youth centers that we're supposed to have inside our community. These are what defunding the police is supposed to be about.
They know they have an army out there in the guys at NYPD that's here to protect them. That's how they got here. Jail us, send all our soldiers to jail, young brothers like Uhuru, so that they can walk in here, with no opposition. You know what I mean? That's colonialism. That's genocide. That's gentrification, which is just a feature of colonialism. You know what I mean? And that's the police role. The police is an arm of the state. It's a part of the government, just like the military is. Every aspect of the military is part of the government. The capitalist, colonialist government is the same people who came here and stole this land from the indigenous people through genocide, who came to Africa, kidnapped us, dispersed us, colonized us, and even up to today, the spaces that we have, if you don't own them, not only own them, if you can't protect them, then they take them. You know what I mean? There's no relief from that. There's not going to be any relief to that short of revolution. You know what I mean? And, getting somebody elected to office is not going to stop that. The only thing that's going to stop the process of gentrification and genocide and colonialism is a revolution to bring in socialism. So we appreciate that presentation from Brother Uhuru and the street organizations, etc. Some of us can understand that because we were in the street organization ourselves. And it was, it happens. It's a natural phenomenon in the community for street organizations to be developed. Second, on the panel, we want to bring up our comrade, our revolutionary comrade, Brother Shep. He's going to make a presentation on gentrification to us. Brother Shep. Uhuru.
I'm from New York, but I've had to spend some time in Philly, so I'll be real quick with Philly and get to what I know best. When we look at gentrification, how it relates to genocide, we're talking about those who come into our community and take it over. Point blank. Malcolm said the key is land. Okay, and that's what I'm really get into. In Philly in particular, you have the universities, Temple University in particular, which has basically taken over almost all of North Philly. Whenever you see rundown buildings and houses that are destroyed and abandoned, you can bet your bottom dollar if they're in that area, particularly in North Philly, that Temple University owns those buildings. Look at Baltimore. You see how Baltimore supposedly burnt down, abandoned buildings, drugs on the streets, la-di-da. Johns Hopkins University owns all that property. Here in New York, Columbia University, main culprits in Harlem. So I'm going to take us back to 1969. In 1969, in the Black Panther Party, which I actually joined in 73 at the age of 19, which was old to be a Panther. Our average age was 17. And 2/3 of our membership was sisters. People need to know that. That's who ran the Panther Party. The women ran the party.
That's right.
So in 69, we put together a newspaper, mainly for the students that were in college and high school. It's called the Black Student Union. And that's what it came out of. The newspaper basically covered two main areas: the 10-point platform of the Black Student Union, and then the main article was dealing with Columbia University and how they were planning to take over West Harlem. This was in 1969. I was trying to find a copy of it to bring to show people, but we'll get that another day. I can bring those archives here. But they had a whole plan, all laid out in 69, and we exposed it, gave it to the community. No one paid attention to that. So what did we get? In 76, I attended Hunter College actually in 74, and with the Black Student Union then, I was in the Panther Party at the same time. Whenever you were a Panther and you were in school, you had to organize on campus, okay, in addition to what you had to do in the community when you got off campus. But Harlem, at that point, had brownstones all abandoned, all over Harlem, mainly in the west side, and you could get one of those buildings for $10. $10. They had this thing called sweat equity. If you could prove that you could renovate and fix that building up, you could have it. So our big master plan was, as students, we would get a whole block. We were going to have a building for ourselves, but then we were going to have a daycare center. We were going to have a medical clinic, all the different things that came out of it that we did, the Panther Party and the Young Lords and all the groups back then. Those community programs. We were going to liberate a whole block. But we didn't have no status as students. We weren't corporate, we weren't nonprofit. We were just students. So what we tried to do was go to the black churches in Harlem and ask them to sponsor us, because they had all the status. And that way we could get those buildings. We went to every black church in Harlem. No one tried to help do this. Then we came to find out after doing research that they were the ones that owned those buildings. And they were hoarding them so they could end up selling them. And that's what happened in the 90s. Combination of all these chambers of commerce that you have in your communities, the community boards, the churches, and the banks. They all conspire to create gentrification in our neighborhoods, which is why you got all the white folks sunning and funning in the park right now. I was shocked when I saw that. I just took a cab from the train station, like, where are the white people coming from? Unbelievable. But outside of that, redlining. You can't get loans. You can't create businesses because it still exists. They say it don't, but it does. Banks look at you and me, They ain't trying to give us no money to do any repairs or do anything. This space is beautiful, man. I hope you'll keep the space, wherever it runs it. Do everything you can to keep it here. Because we don't have spaces to meet, even strategize how to get our community back or how to protect it. This all goes even to the South, y'all. Most of us, our families migrated from the South or from the Caribbean. Anyone in those communities, you can trace that back. What do? Some people trying to go back down south and leave the city. But we don't have the land anymore. Most of the younger folks or the family members, they left, and the elders stayed, and then they raised the taxes, and there was no money to pay for it, and so they ended up going back and selling the property. Once again, we lose land. Same thing in the Caribbean. People selling their land. And then once they sell it, they think they got a massive profit. Those same companies go back and they build hotels and resorts on your land and make millions and billions of dollars. In the meantime, you sitting in an apartment somewhere waiting for them to raise the rent and kick you out because you can't pay the rent. This is what's going on with our people, y'all. We have to organize ourselves to protect what we have. Stop selling your land. If you got people in your family, stop fighting over the land. That's mainly what it is. Oh, I want to get grandpa's land and I want to sell it and get this money. Forget that money. That money is nothing. Talk about straight up capitalism. You're not the capitalist. They are. You're contributing to it. The churches. I gotta mention this. Anybody ever heard of Renaissance Ballroom? In Harlem? Long history, the basketball team, the Reddies, the ballroom, all of that. There's a film that people should look at. It's called Standing on My Brother's Shoulders. I saw that film and it uplifted me because you had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had Spike Lee. They were giving a whole history of the way it was torn down. And I said, wow, they got the money and they can fix it back up again. We can have that whole thing for us. They didn't do that. Find out the Renaissance was owned by Apicidia Baptist Church. Calvin Butts. He sold it for $3 million. That money go back to the community, and we lost the Renaissance. Now you got a condo there. So these churches do not serve the interests of our community. If you're not part of that congregation, you can't even have join their daycare center. Nothing. Okay, this is not what the black church originally was about. Going back to Richard Allen and everything when the Underground Railroad went through the black churches. We have to make those changes. We have to do that. I'll make sure I don't miss anything here. Oh, property. We're talking about the pigs. Pigs protect property. Not just those white folks you see there, but the property that comes along with them. That's why they're here. They're not to protect us, they're here to protect property. That's why when folks was downtown in the white world raising hell, they raised hell. But you do stuff here in the hood, well, you can't now because they're even our hood now. Half of it is, then they'll come, they won't come in, but now they will.
It's time now for the Uhuru Mindset announcements. If you're in need of your daily dose of revolutionary news, please subscribe to the Burning Spear newspaper at burningspearmarketplace.com. Again, for your revolutionary news, please visit burningspearmarketplace.com. You can find the link in the description box or the live chat. Anyone up early on a beautiful, cozy Sunday morning with nothing to watch? Tune in to O'Malley Taught Me every Sunday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern for your weekly political education on African internationalism. You can tune in on Facebook Live and also on YouTube. Please see the description box for those links. Again, that's O'Malley Taught Me. It is done by our chairman of the African People's Socialist Party. It's very, very informative. It's amazing. It's better than binge watching Netflix on Sunday mornings. I promise you. O'Malley Taught Me every Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. And the baby unites. She agrees. African Liberation Day rally. We're going to have an African Liberation Day rally on May 22nd in Brooklyn, New York on Pitkin and Rockaway Avenue. Again, we're going to have an African Liberation Day rally. May 22nd, that's also a Saturday in Brooklyn, New York on Rockaway Avenue and Pitkin Avenue. Also in honor of African Liberation Day, the African People's Socialist Party will be hosting a virtual 2-day conference. That's exciting. Again, that's a virtual 2-day conference. It's in honor of African Liberation Day on May 22nd as well. The Eventbrite link will be in the description box so that you can register, or in the live chat. African Liberation Day is an annual day where Africans come together to discuss strategies for liberation. So be sure to tune into the African Liberation Day 2-day conference. It's a virtual event and you can sign up on Eventbrite. Uhuru.
They're occupying army that's here to protect property and protect their own people. We have to have community control. We said this back in the day. We have to control the education. We have to control the health care, the food, the housing. All the institutions in our community have to be controlled by us, including public safety. Okay? We don't need these pigs. They don't live in our community at all. They need to go. As the brother said, we can take care of ourselves. We don't need them. We can organize our own community. No, that's not the solution. We got to get rid of America, straight up. That's got to happen. Okay.
I like that one.
But we can begin learning how to create our own nation by controlling our communities. You know, and teaching our children and those who are yet to be born. Last but not least, I just want to mention this. This goes to the 90s again. I'm a child care worker by profession. Run group homes, residential centers since 1980. I work with Zulus particularly because they asked for political conscience to be put into hip hop. Because we said back in the day, culture is a weapon for our liberation. So I run all the community affairs for Zulu all over the world. And people who just use hip hop to dance around and spit on their head and don't contribute to the community, we don't deal with the community affairs. You have to give back to the community and be working for the community. But I work with a program called Vision Quest, where we took brothers and sisters out of prison. And behind those bars, sisters, young brothers and sisters, and we did the work outside. I worked on a mobile program. It was a wagon train. We had 8 covered wagons, a herd of 60 animals, mules and horses. Kids slept in teepees, and we traveled all over the country. I was based in Pennsylvania. We traveled from Pittsburgh to Texas and came back, and then went to Florida, came back. I did this for 4 years. I came back to Harlem, and I walked down on 25th Street, and I saw the results of Giuliani when he was a stinking ass mayor there. People might remember when they started eliminating our vendors. That was like #1 step. Let's get rid of all these black folks out here making money, and we ain't getting no taxes for it. And they're out here. And people came to Harlem, and I know they came on Fulton Street, not for the stores, they came for the vendors. In Harlem, he's set up under the guise of police brutality. He set up camps on both rivers on 125th Street. He had a whole army set up on both sides. They would harass and get rid of the vendors. Unfortunately, the black stores, the few that were left, they said, yeah, we need to get rid of the vendors. They keep dirtying the street and they're taking business from us. So when they finally got rid of the vendors, and I was born in Chattanooga, lot that's on 116th Street, to put their wares there. Then they got rid of the black stores. So that whole, we talk about unity, once they divided that up, they got rid of everything. Now you see there's some vendors out there now, it's not like it used to be before. It was like an real African market out there back in the 90s. People came from all over the world to go to 125th Street. And we were able to survive and make money and feed our families. I walked down 125th Street and I'm in, and I went to Lexington Avenue. crossing Park, all of a sudden I see all these white people coming down 125th Street. I'm like, what the hell's going on? Where are they going? Where are they coming from? And there was police all around guarding, like the cavalry used to guard the pioneers when they went into our indigenous people's land. Guarding them as they were walking down 125th Street. I was like hundreds and hundreds of white people. Then I found out what they were doing. They were going on the Metro North, coming from the number 4 train, to go to Yankee Stadium to watch the Yankee game. And they were getting the armed protection to come through Harlem and get on the train and go see the Yankees or leave and go back home to the suburbs. So when we talk about them protecting them, that's real. And that is evidence, they can walk around at 2 in the morning, walking their dog and feel nothing. Back in the day, folks on the block would be fighting each other to see who could take that guy off. What's he doing out here in the street? But it's changed now, but we can make change. That's what revolution is, change. But we have to be organized. We have to strategize. We have to have these meetings. We have to put practice and theory together, come up with solutions, put them out there in the street. Whatever don't work, we come back, we look at it again, reevaluate, and go back out there again. But it's a long distance struggle, y'all. And people always say, what about the youth? I always go beyond that. Okay, it goes from the elders and ancestors all the way to those who are not even born yet. If we don't create a world for our people that they can thrive, then what kind of world are the unborn going to be coming to? That's our responsibility. People make sacrifices for us to be able to even sit in this room and talk. So we have to do the same.
Right on.
All power to the people.
All power to the people.
And free our political prisoners.
Wood. Touch wood. Touch wood. Touch wood. One Africa. One Africa. One Africa. Uhuru. Africa.
Uhuru. I just want to first just appreciate the panelists for coming out, giving an analysis, dealing with the police, giving us the history. Y'all could have been anywhere in the world right now, but y'all here.
Uhuru.
I appreciate that. Definitely. I want to acknowledge our leadership as well. President Columbae Antoinette, who is the international president. She's located in St. Louis, who's doing a tremendous job of organizing InPDUM. Also want to acknowledge the founder of the Uhuru movement, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, who founded this organization in 1972. So that's how long we've been doing the work, and the work has been going on ever since 72. But we, members of the organization, the chairman, and many people who founded the party was putting in the work even before then. And so it is our job in InPDUM to organize the masses of African people, wherever they are, and to carry out the revolution that was started, the Black Revolution that was started in the 60s and the 70s. To be honest, our revolution goes back before then, but we definitely want to carry that torch on. So there was a lot said. I just want to briefly touch on some things before we go into this resolution, because my brother was talking about, we should be just as, I guess, critical of the people in our community as we are as the police. You didn't say the police, but forces outside of our community that cause us harm, because there is intercommunal violence or horizontal violence that take place in our communities. And I think Fife or Randy mentioned, this is part of that process. We have to handle our internal issues a little differently than we handle the state. And so, we don't need to march when it comes to, transforming our communities. What we need to do is organize. And so this is part of that process right here, having this town hall meeting, talking about the different issues that have definitely causes for this intercommunal violence, horizontal violence that takes place. You talked about the police. I thought that, that was important to talk about. And I'm sort of just like reiterating because y'all did touch on some of these things, but, like the theory of African internationalism, which was given to us. This is everything we build is based off of this theory. And it explains the social system and our reality. And so giving us an understanding of that, because everybody has a theory, and based on that theory, that's how we move. That's how we make our decisions, based on what we believe. And so understanding, the material conditions that we live in, understanding that there is a relationship between us and the colonists, and that relationship was developed 600 years ago, and the social system reality that we have today is based off of this design, this creation of colonial capitalism that we're still dealing with. And so, everything that we do is based off of knowing that. And so if we want to solve all the problems that we have in our community, we have to acknowledge that issue. We have to, expose that contradiction that exists within our communities, outside of our communities. So the police, when we talk about the police and we talk about, the more police that you hire, Mom would talk about this, like that contradiction. How do you hire more police, but there's more crime in the community? So, if the only conclusion you can come up with is that the police must be in cahoots with the crime that's taking place in the community. Mm-hmm. And so, we have to understand that. So, we talked about the abolishment of the police. I think y'all brothers really laid it out, and I don't really have to add too much onto that. But just understanding, yes, the police serves the interests of the state, and serves the interests of the ruling class. They're here to protect property. And so, when we look at history, the history of the police is minute. It's very small in the history of the world, the history of humanity. We've been living without the state. We've been living on this earth without police longer than we have with police. So that has to tell you that there's something about the political economic system that causes the need to have some sort of protective force, that exists within our communities. And the chairman talks about, the only reason you have the police is because you have haves and you have have-nots. You have, people who had resources that were stolen. And so the police are protecting all the stolen resources. So, so I always say I'm going to be brief, but it's just so much to say. But what I want to do is just really just skip into the genocide and our position on genocide. And our position is genocide is still taking place. Capitalism is inherently genocidal. It's inherently genocidal. If you think about how it was developed, I had a conversation earlier, I was talking to somebody, and they said that capitalism done the right way is good. It can work. And I'm like, what's the history? I was like, when was capitalism ever done the right way? What does that even look like? Because the history shows that capitalism, it can't be done the right way. It was built off of the exploitation and oppression of African people, enslavement of African people, and the death of indigenous land. In order for it to sustain itself, it has to keep on doing these things. It has to keep on imperialism. Imperialism is how capitalism survives. It has to expand. And if it was the time the United States, it was only 13 colonies, and it came up with this idea of manifest destiny that still stands with these colonists even to this day. Where they had to expand, they said, hey, we destined by God. If God says it, who's to argue with it, right? Who's to argue with that? So this expansion, we destined to rule this continent from the east, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. And once they got to the Pacific Ocean, they said, hold on, they ain't even let the water stop them. They went to Hawaii, they started colonizing the islands. Japan was closed off from everybody for about 200 years. Didn't let nobody in. Until some Americans knocked on the door and said, y'all gonna open your borders and do business with us. This is the mindset of the colonists. And look at that, look at that history of Japan. They was closed for 200 years until these colonists came there. And then they ended up in China. This is why Japan, when they dropped the bomb, people gotta understand the politics behind it. They didn't just bomb Pearl Harbor for nothing. It's because America was in their sphere of influence. But anyway, just moving right along. I just want to read this. We have a petition online. We started this campaign, African Sharks Genocide, in 2015. So make sure everybody sign a petition, African Sharks Genocide petition. And we lay out what genocide is. And in this, there's a full document, and we talk about the United Nations who came up with this definition of genocide. I want to briefly read that. It says, this is Article 2, the United Nations document on genocide. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such. A, killing members of the group. So you don't have to kill a group in whole, you can just kill members of the group. So what happened to the Black Panther Party? Genocide. What happened to the MOVE organization? Genocide. And all the other, you could talk about, Black Liberation, all of these different organizations that we had, Republic of New Africa, go on. There was this concerted effort to destroy these organizations. What they did with the Bloods and Crips. You talked about that. Dividing these organizations, having them fight each other. This is genocide. They orchestrated this genocide. We can talk about us falling into the trap, but we got to educate, we got to overturn it. But we got to look at the puppeteers in this whole thing. So B is causing seriously bodily or mental harm to members of the group. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. D, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Talk about sterilization. They had laws on the books for sterilizing people. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So all of these things has taken place historically in the African community and still is taking place to this day. I think there was some mention earlier about the trauma, and there's a lot of layers to that, but I'll say like Huey P. Newton, he wrote a book called Revolutionary Suicide. And in that book, he did an analysis of Emil Durkheim, wrote a book on suicide. He read this book because Huey P. Newton was a sociologist. And he read this book and he applied that science to the African experience. And he talks about how a lot of our people are dying as a result of harassed. We come home from work, we drink, we work these 9 to 5s, we work ourselves to death. That's reactionary suicide. When you don't engage in the system is killing you. But if you sit back and just allow it to happen, that's reactionary suicide. So revolutionary suicide is known, if we're going to die, we're going to die on our feet. I think, the last poet said, blessed are those who struggle, for oppression is worse than the grave. It is better to live and die for a noble cause than to live and die as a slave. And this is what Huey was talking about. And this is what we do in the International People's Democratic Uhuru movement. We out here, we organize it. And it's like, you can never let the numbers fool you. You know what I'm saying? Like, we put in this work, the Cuban Revolution. I think it was like 60 of them at one time. It's not funny, but it's like, you think about it. It's like, it's 60 people. Fidel was like, we're going to make this happen. And they, they revolted, they rebelled, and they got that country under the control of the proletariat over there. And the China, you can look at the Chinese Revolution, all the same. So, it's all about perseverance and diligence and having the correct theory and understanding. And that's why this movement is so necessary. So, take too much time. I want to read the resolution because this is really what it's about. It's about us putting in the work. And this is a resolution that we adopted during the Black Power Summit. Organization put on the Black Power Summit, and we adopted a resolution on gentrification. And I want to read this resolution, and I want to encourage everyone here to join the working group that we're going to create on gentrification, on tackling this issue. We already been organizing, getting people to go to these community board meetings. And, our outreach coordinators here, Coleco is in the building. So, we need y'all to step to us and talk to us. We're going to probably step to y'all anyway, but y'all need to find out how y'all can get involved in this, working group. Working group on gentrification. Because we're going to start meeting, we're going to talk about how we can tackle this, right? So the resolution says, and this was adopted on January the 24th, whereas gentrification is a process in which working class communities are overrun by affluent communities. Whereas the origins of the term gentrification is the word gentry, meaning people born of noble birth. Whereas colonial capitalism has created a global white gentry and an African underclass. Gentrification is a modern analogy for the historical assault of Africa, African communities, internationally, and African people. Whereas gentrification is a process of urban removal and counterinsurgency. Whereas the unhousing of African families enforces on Africans genocidal conditions. Gentrification and unhousing of Africans leads to increased illness and death, horizontal violence, increased African child mortality, and the death of African children from African families by the colonial state. Whereas gentrification is also a process of neo-colonialism. The African petty bourgeoisie have played a vital role in the advancement of gentrification, the death of African communities. Neo-colonialism is white power and blackface. Whereas the fight against gentrification is a way to organize the African working class in the anti-colonial struggle for African liberation. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, Gentrification Workshop of the Northern Region Black Power Summit held virtually online on the date January 24th, the year 2021. So that's our position on gentrification. And we're gonna create this working group. And we're gonna build it, we're gonna, not sit back. But once again, we put theory into practice. So if you're ready to get organized and be a part of this movement, definitely have that conversation with us. So that's our position on genocide. And I feel we're moving on, right? All right, so right now we're going to do a call. I just want to appreciate everybody coming out here. And once we're going to do this every first Saturday, every month, every first Saturday. So, I want to encourage y'all to come back and encourage y'all to tell somebody to come with y'all next time. And, we're going to build this. We start off small, but we're going to finish strong. And we're going to, each month when we come back here, we're going to double these numbers. And we're going to make sure that because we out here is all about community education. So come in here and get the education, but what are we going to do with it? We got to go out there in the communities, organize our people. Uhuru.
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 All right, so we got our own salvation. We got our own solution to the problems in our community. All of our parents have laid out clearly why we need to step up and solve our own problems. The U.S. government does not care about the freedom, the liberation of the black community. The U.S. government has been built over the enslavement and incarceration of the black community. So we got to we need every man, woman, and child to take on, assume the responsibility to be the leaders, to be the change that we're looking for inside of our community. You dig what I'm saying? Because the government don't care if you Christian or Muslim, they don't care if you blood or if you Crip or Wu or Cho. You know what I'm saying? If you black, they want to make sure that you stay oppressed, that you stay powerless. And we got to make sure that that doesn't happen. So the only way that we make sure that doesn't happen is by we get organized. We got to step up, we got to strengthen our commitment to participate in our own liberation struggle. We're here today to get clarity on what is gentrification, what is genocide, and how do they relate. We realize that gentrification is a displacement of our people from our communities. And we need to have financial security, we need to have adequate housing. You know what I'm saying? So this is a call for membership. This is a call for brothers and sisters to get involved, join the Uhuru movement. This organization has the understanding that self-determination is the highest expression of democracy. You can't have democracy if you don't have community control over your housing. You can't have democracy if you don't have community control over the police. You dig what I'm saying? If you don't have community control over housing, then you're going to have problems like gentrification. So we're calling each other, we're calling on those who are not involved with any organization or not involved with the Uhuru movement to join the Uhuru movement. Membership is as low as $10 a month, $10 a year, $10 annually. And your participation is volunteer on a volunteer basis. So whatever you're available to do, as long as it's 100%, even if it's if you could only give 5% of your time, As long as 100% of your effort during that 5% of your time, then we're going to move the program forward. We're going to bring the people to a high level of understanding, a high level of participation, a high level of clarity on how we can solve our own problems. So this is called the Join the Uhuru movement. Sign our contact sheet if you haven't already. And say go to online joinpdum.com. Fill out the joinpdum.org. You know what I'm saying? And join the Uhuru movement. Is anyone that's here right now that wants to join the Uhuru movement who's not a member? Anyone in here who's not a member of the Uhuru movement that wants to join? Well, you understand what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? So we got other programs that we're striving right now. We're striving to build a housing committee that we can assess the contradictions that exist inside the black community around housing. You know, gentrification is one of them. We're gonna have we got a Saturday sample for schools, so you have children here. We're trying to create programs that the people can participate in and strengthen our confidence and our ability to change our circumstances. Because a lot of us have been demoralized through the court self-pro. So by our activities, by our us leading by example and creating programs where people can see our success, that's going to strengthen their willingness to join our organization, get back in the political life, and reclaim our destiny.
Right on. Uhuru.
Join the Uhuru movement, y'all. You know what I'm saying? We here. Uhuru.
Uhuru.
You know, this is Uhuru Mindset. This is our program. And we appreciate everyone for tuning in and, joining this discussion. We're going to continue to have these discussions. We're going to continue to engage with the community and create Uhuru mindsets wherever you are. So continue to tune into our program. Uhuru.